It's at Kadesh that they failed to trust God. And here the army of Chedorlaomer comes to Kadesh and conquered the Amalekites and conquered the Amorites. And the Amalekites and Amorites were both tribes that troubled the children of Israel in their wilderness years. While they were in the wilderness, they were constantly dealing with the Amalekites and the Amorites, attacking them. And Chedorlaomer's army defeated the Amalekites and the Amorites. Like, these are all, man, this guy's more powerful than their enemies. And then finally, verse 8 and 9, you have the battle against the 5 kings that included Sodom and Gomorrah. Verse 8 says, and the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went out and joined together in battle in the valley of Siddim against Chedorlaomer and against the other 3 kings that are with Chedorlaomer. Verse 10 says, now the valley of Siddim was full of asphalt pits, tar pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Some fell there. The idea is they fell into the tar pits. They fell into the slime and died. And the remainder fled into the mountains. So the 5 kings that included Sodom and Gomorrah were defeated. Then verse 11, then they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They spoiled the cities. They took the spoils of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Verse 12 tells us, and they also took Lot, Abram's brother's son. Now notice, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. Lot was living in Sodom at this point. I mentioned this last week, but with Lot, we see this slow progression into compromise. This slow progression into compromise, or a downward progression into compromise. If you remember in the last chapter, Lot lifted his eyes towards Sodom. First he looked, and then he decided to pitch his tent near Sodom. Now he's living in Sodom. And it gets worse when we get to chapter 19. Lot is sitting in the gate of Sodom. That means Lot became a leader of the city of Sodom. He's a prominent person in that city. And you can look at the life of Lot, and you see that his compromise, it has a history. Compromise and sin always has a history. You can always trace it back to decisions that were made in your life and in my life, where I decided to do this, and then I decided to do that, and then I decided to do that, and that's how I ended up where I am. There's always a history to it. There's always a pattern that you can follow to see how you got there. 2 Peter chapter 2 tells us that Lot was a righteous man, but he was in anguish, it says, over the filthy conduct of the wicked people of Sodom. He was in anguish over the immorality of that city, and it says, and he was tormented by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds. Lot was righteous. Lot knew right from wrong. Lot knew that Sodom was wicked. He was in anguish, living there because of the immorality. But here's the thing, Lot didn't leave. He didn't leave. He didn't move away. In fact, after he's rescued here by Abram, he moves back to Sodom and continues to live there. Lot should have left. Lot should have left Sodom. He should have separated himself from Sodom. And listen, if you know something is wrong, if you know something is bad for you to be around, and you're in anguish every time you do it, and every time you're around it, or you're in anguish every time you're around a particular person or a group of people, and you know hanging out with them is just bad for you, separate yourself. Don't continue in it. Don't continue to go there or live there. Separate. Separate yourself in the relationship. Don't keep living in Sodom when you know you shouldn't be living in Sodom. Lot continued to live in Sodom. So Lot is taken captive by these armies. They carry him away. They depart. He's now a slave as they leave. Verse 13, then one who had escaped from the battle came and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Aner, and they were allies of Abram. So a person who escaped comes to tell Abram what happened to Lot. And notice in verse 13 he's described as Abram the Hebrew. This is the first time we see the word Hebrew in the Bible. The word Hebrew, listen, it means one from beyond. One from beyond. The Hebrew language is very descriptive. Right? Abraham was from beyond the Euphrates River. He wasn't from there. So they called him the Hebrew, the one from beyond. The name Hebrew shows that Abram was considered an outsider by the Canaanites. He's not from here. He's not one of us. He's a stranger. He's an outsider. You know, Hebrews 11 says Abram lived as a stranger and foreigner in the land. He was from beyond. You know, for us, we live in the world, but we're not supposed to be of the world. Right? We should be strangers in this world. We should feel like outsiders. And the way that we live in this world and the way we conduct ourselves in front of other people should show that we're outsiders. We're not part of this world. Our lives should be noticeably different from the way that the world lives. So that people would label us, just like they labeled Abram. You know, whenever you see the word Hebrew in the Old Testament and someone referred to as a Hebrew, it's usually not them referring to themselves. They're not saying, I'm a Hebrew. It's someone else saying, he's a Hebrew, or they're Hebrews, right? They're from beyond. They're outsiders. There was something different about the way that they lived that other people could look on and say, they're not from here. They're not our people. They're different. And that's how it should be for us. Others should be able to look on and say, there's something different about the way that person lives. They're not like us. Now watch what happens in verse 14. Now when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his own house, and he went in pursuit, hot pursuit, as far as Dan. Remember, Dan's way up in the northern part of Israel. And Abram was in Hebron, kind of in the central or southern central part of Israel, and he pursues them all the way up to Dan. Abram jumps into action here when he heard the news about his nephew Lot, that he had been taken captive. And notice that Abram had an army of 318 trained servants. That is, they're trained for battle. Abram's servants were ready for battle. He had trained them for battle. Listen, he trained them for battle before there was a battle. Before there was a war, he trained them. And why did he do that? Well, just in case there is a battle. Just in case there is a war someday, he wants to be ready for it. So he had these men trained up, ready to fight at a moment's notice. And I think there's an important lesson in that for us, that we always want to be trained and ready for battle. Not physical battle, but spiritual battle. Right? And you do the training before the war starts, before the battle starts. If you wait until the battle's happening, that's too late.